There's a path behind my grandmother's old house that cuts through a small stretch of woods. And when I was young, I noticed something strange about it. Every few months, the path would start to disappear. Grass would creep in from the edges, leaves would pile up, branches would droop low across it, and every few months, someone would have to walk it again, clear it again, beat it back into shape. I remember thinking that was a flaw, that the path was broken somehow, that a real path, a good one, would just stay open once you made it. I think about that a lot now, because I think most of us carry that same assumption into our lives. You start something, a practice, a discipline, a new direction. You feel that initial surge of clarity. You walk the path for a while, and then one morning you wake up and it's overgrown again. The habits have slipped. The motivation is gone. The clarity you felt 3 weeks ago is buried under leaves. And you think, here I am again, back at the beginning, starting over, again, right? And that thought, that again, carries so much weight. It's not just a word, it's a verdict. It means something must be wrong with you. It means you're the kind of person who can't follow through, who can't stay the course, who keeps circling back to the same starting line while everyone else is miles ahead. But what if you're wrong about that? Not about the starting over, that part is real, but about what it means. There's an old concept in Hindu philosophy called samsara. It's usually translated as the cycle of birth and death, this great wheel of existence that keeps turning. But samsara isn't just about lifetimes. It shows up in your weeks, your months, your Tuesday afternoons. It's the cycle of beginning and forgetting and beginning again that every human being lives through over and over. The ancient teachers didn't describe this cycle because they thought it was a mistake. They described it because they recognized it as the fundamental pattern of being alive. In plain words, starting over isn't a bug, it's the operating system. But we don't feel that way, do we? We feel like starting over is evidence of failure. And the reason we feel that way has a lot to do with a lie we absorb so early we don't even recognize it as a lie. The lie is this: you're supposed to get it once and keep it forever. You learn the lesson, you build the habit, you find the motivation, and then you're done. It stays, like a trophy on a shelf, like a degree on a wall. You earned it, so it's yours. But almost nothing alive works like that. Nothing. Think about your body for a second. You ate yesterday, right? Good meal, maybe you enjoyed it, it gave you energy, and yet here you are today, hungry again. Does that mean yesterday's meal failed? Does that mean your body is broken because it didn't hold on to that nourishment permanently? Of course not. You understand that eating is something you do again and again, not because something is wrong, but because that's how a living body sustains itself. So why don't we grant the same understanding to our minds, to our intentions, to our sense of direction? Your clarity needs to be fed. Your discipline needs to be fed. Your sense of purpose, it gets hungry too. And when you find yourself starting over, you're not failing. You're feeding yourself again. See, that path behind the house, it didn't grow over because it was a bad path. It grew over because it was surrounded by life. Living things encroach. That's what living things do. The grass doesn't care about your plans. It just grows. And the forest of your daily life, your distractions, your fatigue, your obligations, the 1,000 small urgencies that crowd in every week, they're always growing too, always creeping back over whatever clearing you made. That's not a problem with you. That's the nature of the terrain. There's a beautiful Zen teaching that says, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And most people hear that as a gritty, motivational statement. Keep going, don't quit, be tough. But I think it's saying something much quieter than that. I think it's saying that the getting up is not separate from the path. The getting up is the path. The 8th rising is not a correction for the 7th fall. It is the practice itself, which basically means that the person who keeps starting over and the person who has quote unquote made it are often doing the exact same thing. The difference is that one of them has stopped judging themselves for it. Now let me ask you something and be honest. When you start over, what's the first thing you say to yourself? Because I'd bet it's not kind. I'd bet it sounds something like, why can't I just stick with this? Or other people don't struggle with this. Or the really quiet one, the one that sits underneath all the others. Maybe I'm just not the kind of person who can change. That voice, that's not wisdom. That's not discernment. That's an old pattern of thought doing what old patterns do, creeping over your path like grass. And the cruelest thing about it is that it disguises itself as honesty. It feels like you're just being realistic, just seeing things clearly. But think about it this way. If a friend came to you and said, I was meditating every day for 3 weeks, and then I stopped, and now I feel terrible about it, would you look at them and say, yeah, you're right, you're a failure? You wouldn't. You'd say, so start again. 3 weeks is something. Start again. And you'd mean it. You'd see it so clearly when it's someone else's path. The starting over would seem obvious to you. Natural. No big deal. So why is it such a catastrophe when it's yours? The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, who was the emperor of Rome, arguably the most powerful man in the ancient world, he filled an entire journal with reminders to himself about how to behave, how to think, how to respond to difficulty. And these weren't entries he wrote once. He wrote the same ideas over and over, sometimes almost the same sentence on different pages. Patience, perspective, letting go of what he can't control. The same lessons, repeated. Now here's a man who had every resource available to him, teachers, time, authority, and he still had to remind himself, still had to return to the basics, still had to start over in his own mind, again and again, not because he was weak, but because that's how understanding actually works in a human life. It doesn't arrive and stay, it arrives and fades and has to be invited back. In real life, that looks like you reading a book that changes your perspective, feeling incredible for a few days, and then 3 weeks later realizing you've completely forgotten how it made you feel. It looks like committing to something on Sunday night and losing the thread by Wednesday. It looks like knowing what matters to you and still somehow spending 2 hours on your phone doing something that doesn't. That's not a failing, that's being a person. The Tao Te Ching says, returning is the movement of the Tao, which is one of those lines that sounds simple and then keeps getting deeper the longer you sit with it. Returning, not arriving, returning. The fundamental motion of reality is not a straight line forward, it's a circle that comes back. The seasons return, the breath goes out and comes back in, the tide leaves and the tide returns, and your intention, your focus, your will, they follow the same pattern. Here's what that looks like in real life. You don't build a good life by finding your footing once. You build a good life by becoming someone who is patient with the process of finding it again, and again, and again. Each time, a little faster. Each time, a little less drama. Each time, with a little more gentleness toward yourself. Because here's something I want you to notice. You say you keep starting over, right? But look at you. You're here. You're still starting. Do you understand what that actually means? It means you haven't given up. And that's not nothing. That's actually the whole thing. The people who lose their way in life, the ones who truly get stuck, they're not the ones who keep starting over. They're the ones who stop starting. They're the ones who hear that voice say, you're just going to fail again. And this time, they believe it. They sit down on the overgrown path and they don't get up. Not because they're weak, but because no one ever told them that the starting over was the point. So let me tell you now, in case no one has, the starting over is the point. Every tradition that has taken an honest look at human nature has said the same thing in different words. The Buddha talked about practice, which is not a word that means do it perfectly. It means do it again. The Stoics talked about returning to your principles each morning because they knew the night would erode them. The Bhagavad Gita talks about action without attachment to results, which really means stop measuring your worth by whether the path stayed clear and just walk it again. They all saw the same truth, that you will wander, that you will forget, and that the wandering and the forgetting are not obstacles to the path. They are the path. Now, there's one more thing I want to say about this, and it might be the most important part. Each time you start over, you are not in the same place. I know it feels like you are. I know it looks like the same starting line, but you're not the same person standing there. You've been changed by every attempt, even the ones that collapsed, especially the ones that collapsed. Think about that path in the woods again. Every time someone walked it and cleared it, even if the forest grew back, the ground underneath was a little more compressed. The soil was a little firmer. The roots had been disturbed just enough that they grew back a little thinner. The path was easier to find, even under the overgrowth, because something underneath had been shaped by the walking. That's what's happening in you. Something underneath is being shaped. Something is firmer now than it was the first time you tried. You might not be able to see it, but it's there. The fact that you recognized you'd stopped, the fact that you felt the pull to begin again, that recognition is the compressed ground. That's the evidence that all your previous attempts did something. Remember this, you are not a straight line. You are not supposed to be a straight line. You're a spiral, and a spiral passes over the same point again and again, but each time it's a little higher. Each time there's a little more altitude, a little more understanding, even if the view looks the same from up there. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, I'm starting over again, try changing one word. Not starting over, starting again. Over means it was wasted. Again means it continues. And it does continue. That's the quiet, stubborn miracle of being human. You lose the thread and you pick it up. You forget and you remember. You fall down 7 times, you get up 8. The path will grow over. It always does. Walk it again.